Welcome back to Storytime, where real nightmares are never far from the truth. Today, we bring you a case that chilled even the most hardened officers. A routine welfare check turned into a descent into something no training could ever prepare them for. It started with a 911 call, just a faint whisper. "He's watching me from the walls. Please. Help." The dispatcher on duty, Officer Tanya Morales, could barely make out the words. The line was full of static, like it was coming from an old radio. The caller ID listed the address as 129 Briar Hollow Road, a house that had been marked vacant since the family that once lived there disappeared 2 years ago. Tanya dispatched officers Rick Carson and Mia Halley for a welfare check. They joked about it being just another squat call, but Tanya couldn't shake the voice in her head. That voice didn't sound like a prank, it sounded like fear. When Carson and Halley arrived, the house was as expected. Boarded windows, grass overgrown, and a heavy silence that seemed to muffle the wind. But the front door was slightly ajar, creaking gently like it had just been pushed open. Inside, the smell hit them first. Not rot, not mildew. Something metallic, like blood and iron. "Dispatch, we're at the location," Carson said. The doors open, proceeding inside to clear the property. No response. "Dispatch?" he repeated. Nothing. Just static. He exchanged a look with Halley. Their radios had full signal. The dispatch center was only 6 miles away. They entered with flashlights raised, the beam slicing through the dust-thick air. The living room still had furniture covered in plastic, but the couch cushions were slashed open, stuffing spilling like entrails. "Looks like squatters," Halley whispered. Then they heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It came from upstairs. Rhythmic slow, too deliberate to be an animal. Weapons drawn, they moved up the staircase. With each step, the tapping got louder, faster, like it knew they were coming. They reached the hallway. 5 doors. Suddenly, slam! One door at the end closed on its own. They rushed forward, Carson kicking it open. Empty, no windows. No exits, just a child's room. Torn wallpaper, a crib flipped over. And on the walls, hundreds of tiny handprints, some smeared in a rusty brown. Halley slowly turned to Carson. "This wasn't in the original missing persons report, was it?" Carson didn't answer. He was staring at something under the crib. A burnt police badge. It was blackened, melted at the edges. He picked it up. The number was still visible. It was his badge number. Before he could react, a scream echoed from downstairs. Tanya's voice. "Officer down! Back up now!" He ran to the staircase, but there was no one. Just static crackling from his shoulder radio, even though it was off. Then it repeated, but this time it was his own voice. "Officer down, back up now!" Halley pulled him back. "We're leaving now." As they turned to go, the house changed. The hallway behind them no longer led to stairs. Just more rooms. The layout was twisting, impossible. What the hell? Carson backed into a door, opened it, only to find the front porch. Daylight outside, they ran. Breathing heavy, they made it to the patrol car. It was gone. In its place stood a rusted-out 70s cruiser, the old logo of the town police barely visible on the side. Behind them was just dense trees. Not a road, no driveway. No sign they'd ever entered anything at all. The radio buzzed again. This time it wasn't static. A child's voice, soft, whispering, "We called for help. You didn't come. Now you stay." Then everything went black. Carson woke up in a hospital 2 days later. Halley didn't. They found him passed out near the edge of Briar Hollow Woods alone. His body was covered in deep scratches. His badge melted into his chest like it had fused with his skin. The house still vacant. Still untouched. The log showed no dispatch call was ever made. No record of Officer Morales ever being on duty that night. There was no 911 call on file. Carson resigned a month later. He doesn't talk about what happened. But every year on that same night, 129 Briar Hollow Road lights up. The house appears on satellite imagery for 1 hour, then vanishes. Locals say you can hear the police radio buzzing from the woods. The same line on repeat, "Officer down. Back up now," but no one answers anymore. This is a true story told by a former sheriff's deputy from a small rural town in Nebraska. It was never officially documented, and those involved rarely speak about it today. Some call it a legend, others lived it. You decide. It was February 2013. Caller says she heard screaming near the old barn. That was odd. Birch Hollow had been deserted for years. No power, no people. The property belonged to a family who disappeared in the 1980s. No one ever bought it after that. Deputy Reese didn't think much of it. He assumed it was a trespasser or some teens messing around. He grabbed a flashlight, radioed dispatch, and headed out alone. On the road to the farm was dirt, narrow and slick from a recent snowmelt. When he arrived, everything looked dead quiet. The farmhouse stood collapsed, weather-rotted and covered in ivy. But the barn, still standing, still intact. Reese scanned the area. Nothing. He walked up to the barn door. It was slightly open. That's when the smell hit him. Rot mold. Something else. Something metallic. He drew his flashlight and gently pushed the door open with his boot. The inside was pitch black. He called out, "Sheriff's Department, anyone inside?" No answer. But then he heard it. A woman's voice, crying. It sounded like it was coming from beneath the barn floor. He found a trapdoor in the far corner, covered with hay and old boards. When he opened it, a blast of cold air shot up. The crying got louder. He radioed dispatch. "I've got something weird out here. Going underground to investigate." But the signal broke up. Only static came through. He descended the wooden steps into what looked like a storm cellar. Except it didn't feel like a cellar. The walls were lined with stone. The temperature dropped by at least 20 degrees. And the deeper he went, the louder the crying became. But here's where it gets wrong. The crying stopped. Suddenly, he turned a corner and found dozens of dolls hanging from the ceiling by wires. Each had their eyes scratched out. One of them was still rocking as if recently moved. Then, a whisper right behind him. "Get out!" Reese spun around. Nothing there. He raised his flashlight and noticed something strange. On the wall was an old photograph nailed to the stone. It showed a family of 5, a man, woman, and 3 children, all standing in front of that same barn. Their eyes, too, were scratched out. Reese backed away, only to hear footsteps upstairs. Heavy, slow. Someone had entered the barn above. He ran up the steps and burst through the trapdoor, but the barn was empty. Except for one thing, a woman now stood at the barn's center. Pale hair dripping wet, wearing a dress soaked in mud. She looked at him, tilted her head slowly, then let out a blood-curdling scream. "Let me see your hands." She didn't move. Just screamed again, longer this time, then vanished, not ran, not fell, just gone. Reese sprinted out of the barn, heart pounding. As he got to his car, the engine was dead. No lights, no power, the radio too, just static. That's when his flashlight cut out. He stood in pitch darkness for almost 10 minutes before he finally saw another light, a patrol cruiser pulling up. It was Deputy Callahan, but when Callahan got out of the car, his face was pale. He said, "What the hell were you doing out here?" Reese replied, "What do you mean?" "I got the dispatch call about the break-in." Callahan shook his head. "We didn't send you. Nobody dispatched anything. You were off duty tonight." Reese stared at him, stunned. He checked his radio again. The last logged communication? Nothing from dispatch. No records. Back at the station, Reese demanded a playback of the 911 call. There was one, but it was garbled. The only clear part was a woman whispering, "He's here, under the barn. Help us." After that night, Deputy Reese never worked another solo patrol. But that wasn't the end. 1 week later, the barn burned to the ground in an unexplained fire. No storm, no lightning, just flames. And under the rubble, investigators found a sealed iron hatch that hadn't been part of any blueprint. Inside were bones, small. Dozens of them, most likely children. DNA testing was inconclusive, but the sheriff quietly closed the case. The land was sold and fenced off. Today, locals say if you drive past the old Birch Hollow field at night, you might see a barn standing there again, even though it was destroyed. Just for a second, then it vanishes. And if you stop, you might hear someone crying. Underneath? Was it a spirit calling for help? A crime lost to time? Or something darker? Let us know what you think in the comments. And remember, some calls shouldn't be answered. Officer Ethan Grady had been working the night shift at the Harlan County Sheriff's Department for 5 years. He'd seen his fair share of late-night drunks, domestic disputes, and even a few high-speed chases. But nothing prepared him for what happened on the night of October 14th, 2017. That evening started slow, cold wind swept through the mountains, and the station's old heating system hummed low like a growling dog. Ethan was alone that night. His partner called in sick, and the other patrol units were busy handling a pileup on the interstate. Around 2:13 a.m., a call crackled through dispatch. Unit 47, we have a 1096 reported near the old county jail. Possible mentally unstable subject. Caller says someone is screaming inside. Ethan frowned. That building had been abandoned for over a decade. The old Harlan County Jail had closed in 2006 after multiple reports of inhumane conditions and unexplained inmate deaths. Some said it was cursed, others blamed asbestos and poor maintenance. But Ethan, he didn't believe in curses, just people with problems. He grabbed his flashlight and radio, hopped into his cruiser, and drove into the fog. Seat 1. The screams inside the jail sat like a rotting carcass at the end of Old Quarry Road. Windows shattered, vines crawling up the brick, roof partially caved in. Ethan parked, stepped out, and immediately felt it. A heavy stillness, not the calm kind. The kind that feels like someone is holding their breath, watching you. He stepped inside. The air was thick with mold and rust. His boots echoed as he walked past old cells, each one a tomb of rusted iron bars and forgotten stories. Then he heard it, a scream. Not a scream of pain or fear, but rage. It echoed down the corridor, followed by a loud clang, like a door slamming shut. Ethan drew his weapon. Harlan PD. If anyone's in here, come out now. No response. He moved deeper, past the booking room to the cell block. That's when his flashlight flickered. For a split second in the flickering beam, he saw it. A man. Inside one of the cells. Pale, shirtless, eyes wide open, staring right at him. Ethan froze. Sir, you need to come with me. Are you injured? No answer. The man just stared. Ethan approached, but when he reached the cell, it was empty. No one there. He shined his light around. The floor was covered in dust, undisturbed. No footprints but his own. Quieten 2, the cell that shouldn't exist. Ethan tried to radio dispatch. Nothing static. His phone had no signal either. He spun around. A cell door had shut by itself. Only this cell wasn't on any of the blueprints. He'd reviewed them back in training. This wing didn't exist. The hallway behind him had changed. It was longer now. Dim lights flickered on overhead, even though the jail had no power. The exit was gone. He turned around trying to keep calm, retracing his steps. Each hallway twisted in unnatural angles. The place had changed. It was like he was walking in circles even though he moved in a straight line. The air got colder. Breathing became harder. Then he heard it. Whispers. You shouldn't be here. You let us die. You let us rot. They came from every direction, echoing voices. Angry, sorrowful. He passed another cell. Inside, he saw a child, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the floor, her eyes black and mouth sewn shut with wire. He blinked. She was gone. To 3. The truth beneath Ethan finally found a stairwell. He rushed down, hoping to find a window or door, but instead he found the basement. And in that basement was a single lit room. Inside records, hundreds of files. Old inmate reports, he scanned them, desperate for any clue. Then he found one. Inmate 306 Victor Riles. Died in cell 13, October 14th, 1997. Same date? Exactly 20 years ago to the day. Victor was beaten by guards and left to die in isolation. They covered it up, claimed he hung himself. Ethan looked at the photo stapled to the file. It was the man he saw in the cell. Suddenly the room slammed shut. Lights out, everything went black. And then he felt it. Cold hands, dozens of them. Grabbing, clawing. Pulling him down, he screamed, firing his weapon, swinging wildly, but he was alone. And then... silence. Epilogue. Found in the morning. At 6:04 a.m., officers found Ethan outside the jail, unconscious, curled up in the mud. He was shaking, muttering over and over, "Cell 13. He's still there, he never left." No one believed him. The department chalked it up to stress and hallucination. But Ethan never returned to work. He left town, changed his name, and never spoke of that night again. The jail? It was torn down 6 months later. Thanks for tuning in to Storytime. If this tale left you looking over your shoulder, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more real horror stories every week. Until next time, stay safe and stay in the light.